Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, "Make My Son Wear Uncomfortable Shoes So It's Uniform?" Get ready for the ugliest shoes you've ever seen. I found out my son was a genius, and the public schools around here are lacking. I put son into a private school, where I had the most difficult time ever finding all white shoes my son can wear. Then an announcement was made that some non-white was allowed. His feet are wide and he has high arches. I searched until I found a pair I thought would work, high-end shoes, white with a small silver stripe, $90. After the first day of school, I got a letter that my son's shoes were unacceptable because they had to have uniformity in their pictures, and that he couldn't attend class without all white shoes. I went to Walmart and bought the only pair of white shoes they had close to his size. No wides were available and none of the shoes had arch support. Cue the malicious compliance. I sat my son down and asked if he remembered me talking to him about taking care of his uniforms when he played. Son, yes. Me, well, I want you to forget all of that with these shoes. I want you to make them as ugly as possible. Get red playground dust all over them, rub them in the grass to get grass stains, and purposefully scuff your shoes when you go on the stairs. Less than a month into the school year, those shoes looked like they'd been through a war. The school was stubborn though, they knew what I was doing and never confronted me. They knew he had a perfectly respectable pair of shoes at home, but had him in his atrocious, orange-green-grey shoes instead. The next story is titled, "Okay, I'll only wear the provided uniform." So my local government workplace decided to introduce a strict uniform a few years ago. We always had a dress code, no jeans, no shorts, no exposed midriff, and if you didn't comply with it, words would be had, so most people were sensible and dressed for work accordingly. But sadly, according to management, that needed to change. The uniform chosen was awful. Black skirt or trousers of your own, fine so far. White blouse and jazzy neck scarf for ladies, white shirt and jazzy tie for gentlemen. These were provided for us. Staff had to wear the scarf or tie despite it being a strangle risk. We work with the public who are sometimes confrontational, and even our lanyards had to be the special breakaway type in case we were attacked. Suddenly that risk was forgotten, ignored. Not to mention unnecessary gendering of the uniform. I asked for a tie and was refused. Enter the MC. We did not plan or coordinate this, but somehow everyone, in every satellite office, came to the same conclusion. We will wear the uniform you provide. We will only wear the uniform you provide. Now, being a local government, the budget was pretty non-existent. So the quality of the shirts was awful. Paper thin, see-through and cheap. Badly sized, people having to request several sizes bigger than they wear from regular shops in order for them to fit. Full-time staff, who almost always worked 5 days per week, were allocated 2 shirts. Part-time staff were allowed 1 shirt, no matter how many days their shifts were spread over. Now either one of 2 things will happen here. Either the shirts will become very grubby after a day of work, and you turn up the next day in a grubby shirt which looks very unprofessional, or you wash it after every shift, in which case it will become worn, frayed and even more thin and see-through after a few months, which looks very unprofessional, and will need replacing after a few months, which there was no budget for. After a very scruffy-looking year, and several requests from the 80 or so staff for new shirts, the rules were relaxed somewhat so that staff can wear any plain white, black, or monochrome clothes that they wish. And suddenly, everyone looks much nicer, more professional and coordinated. The next story is titled, "Company Travel, Always a Rich Vein for this sub." Reading some of the submissions here of late reminded me of a company I worked for around 10 years ago. I was an IT tech. This company had factories in 3 corners of the UK, Southampton, Newcastle upon Tyne and Belfast, as well as more factories and offices around the globe. Being the IT base in Southampton, we'd quite regularly have to fly up to Newcastle, or over to Belfast to fix an issue or just for routine maintenance on their kit. Often the higher-up managers would be making the same journeys, so we'd arrange with their PA to share the taxi from the office to the airport, make sure we're on the same flight, then share the taxi at the other end to the factory there. These were executive taxis, long wheelbase BMW 7 Series and Merc S-Class usually. At the destination there'd be a man with a little sign for the exec who grab her bags and take us to the car. All very nice. If the visit required an overnight stay, they'd put us up in the same 4-star hotel as the execs, as it was near the factory on an industrial estate, and again, we could share taxis. This was a pretty sweet and sensible deal. Until the company was owned by a larger group, who decided on a top-down edict that all job grades below exec level didn't get business class travel. Didn't get exec taxis. Number 4-star hotels. We could also only eat at the hotel's restaurant, unless we were entertaining guests from another company. Obviously this was going to affect us as an IT team, so we tried to push back on it. Not happening. You have to follow the letter of the law. The par, we had one for IT as well as the couple who worked for the execs, got their heads together and came up with the plan. First thing was, our flights had to change. We were previously using an airline which operated small aircraft in a business class only configuration. They left Southampton at around 8 AM, meaning we'd arrive in Newcastle ready to start the day's work. The return flight departed at 18:30ish, meaning we could leave at 5 and get home in time for dinner. The only other option was a commercial airline. This flight left mid-morning, and because it wasn't business class, it took longer to get through security etc., meaning we had to present at the airport at 9ish for the 11:15 flight. Not arriving in Newcastle until lunchtime. Wasted half a day working right there. Rather than sharing the executive taxi to the airport, with which we had an account, we were stand on the street and hail a hackney, which turned out to cost nearly twice the pre-booked exec option. The return flight departed at 15:30, so unless you only had an hour's work to do, you had to now stay the night somewhere. We were only allowed to book from one of two chains, Premier Inn and Travelodge. Turns out the Premier Inn in the middle of Newcastle costs more than the 4-star place out on the industrial estate. Plus now I've got places to go out, and a much longer taxi ride from the office. As anyone who's stayed in one knows, these chain hotels have generally crap but hugely overpriced restaurants. I can see cheap options which I'd be fine with, like Nando's or Zizi from my room, but no, I have to go to the on-site restaurant and order a £25 steak. My favorite trip was one where I had to take a new server up there. The company wouldn't pay for it to be couriered as it was too heavy. They wouldn't pay for the baggage allowance. Policy was only cabin baggage on the commercial flights. They would have taken it no probs on the other airline. So I had to drive. Company standard was to pay 45 per mile for the first 10,000 business miles in a tax year. I'd recently bought a cheap diesel that would do 70 plus mpg if I kept it below 60 miles per hour. And as I'd be driving on company time, why not? 350 miles each way cost me a little over £50 on diesel at that time, and I got paid £315 in expenses for doing it. The airfare on the business class jet would have been around £250 return. Our departmental PA worked out that travel as a whole was now costing the IT department roughly 3 times what it used to under the old system, and that's not counting the missed hours when we could have been working. Of course nothing ever came of it, because the people who make these decisions never bother looking into the impact of them, or probably never even get a report that would highlight it. From our point of view, it meant a problem that could be sorted in a single day now took at least 2, and we were away from the office a lot more. The next story is titled, No More Per Diem. No more cheap lunches. Years ago I worked for a company that was acquired, merged with a much larger company. There were of course management changes and policy changes. That's to be expected. We were told that pretty much everything would stay the same for us though: health benefits, mileage reimbursement, travel expenses, etc. Well, almost everything made the cut except for per diem. Per diem was easy with the old company. If you spent the night in a city, accounting looked up the GSA per diem rate for that city and you got reimbursed automatically. All you had to do was present a copy of your hotel receipt, which you had anyway for expense purposes. Per diem for meals, incidentals, and entertainment (M&E) normally works out to $45 minus $55 per days, which is supposed to cover pretty much everything except car rental, fuel, and major project expenses. I like to eat well when I travel, so $55 doesn't always cover my meal expenses, but it's better than nothing and I can afford it. Of course some of the guys would spend like $5 per day on canned fruit and sandwiches, then pocket the rest. More power to them. During the meeting where they announced the merger, they mentioned that per diem is ending and that all expenses will now be reimbursed directly, meaning that we have to submit receipts for everything that we want to be reimbursed for. This is a huge hassle, especially on long projects with a lot of expenses. It irritated me enough that I asked one of the VPs about it during lunch. Me, so what's with the change in per diem? It's a lot easier to deal with and no one has to keep track of dozens of receipts. VP, I bet you guys like making a few extra bucks from per diem, don't you? Me, not really, it doesn't always cover the full expenses, but it's easier to keep track of. VP, well, in order to keep expenses under control, we will only reimburse exactly what is needed. This struck me as condescending and stupid. The guys this affected were making $75,000 to $125,000 plus a year, so it's not like we were seriously padding our paychecks with an extra $20 minus $40 per days for per diem. It also meant expenses took an extra hour per week because of dealing with receipts. Of course, I put that hour on my timesheet as overhead. As part of this stupid policy change, they didn't ask for itemized receipts, just the signed copy, and the limits for meals were quite high: $15 breakfast, $25 lunch, $45 dinner. Looks like I'm about to start eating really well. I normally skipped breakfast because it upsets my stomach if I eat early, but not anymore. If there wasn't a restaurant where I could blow $15 on a healthy meal, I would at least pick up a couple energy drinks and a box of breakfast bars, even if I wasn't going to consume them right away. No more Whataburger or Wendy's for lunch unless I was in a hurry. Now I'm going to Chili's, Fridays, or any other place where I can spend close to $25 for a decent lunch. Same for dinner. $45 pays for a decent steak and a beer at Texas Roadhouse or Outback. Or I could just sit at the bar, order chips and salsa, then drink $35 of beer and liquor. They didn't ask for itemized receipts, so they would never know. Now they're paying out close to $85 per day just for meals, plus dry cleaning and whatever else I had to buy while traveling, not to mention the hour or two I have to waste submitting receipts every week. The next story is titled, What? It's in the uniform guidelines. Many years ago, when I was driving cabs, the company supplied shirts, and had guidelines that the pants had to be navy blue or black, shorts or long pants or skirts. All good so far. Except that one driver of my acquaintance wanted to wear cargo pants. One of the road supervisors saw him and said he had to wear what was in the handbook. The driver said they were black pants. What more did he want? Apparently cargo pants were too long to be shorts and too short to be trousers, so he had to change them. If he didn't, he'd be taken off the road until he complied. Fine, said the driver. On his next shift, he presented wearing a black knee-length skirt with the cargo pants underneath. Predictably, management hit the roof. What the hell did he think he was playing at, etc., etc., etc. Well, he said the handbook did not specify that skirts were only for women to be wearing. After all, if women could wear trousers, men could wear skirts. They looked at the handbook. It did indeed fail to specify which gender was to wear what. But then they pointed at the cargo pants. What the hell was that about, they wanted to know. Oh, he said. That's my underwear. There's no specification anywhere in there about what kind of underwear I can wear under a skirt. Now, I'd like to say they caved in and let him wear the cargos. In an ideal world, that would have happened. But he did get to drive like that for about 6 months while they tried to figure out a way to stop him from doing it without actually going to the trouble of printing up another employee handbook. He even made it into the papers. Eventually, they bit the bullet and had the employee handbook reprinted in its entirety at company expense. The relevant section now specifies that men can only wear pants that are either trousers or are shorts and not cargo pants, and that women can either wear those or skirts. On the day they handed him the freshly printed handbook and told him to take the damn skirt off, he handed in his resignation, quit cab driving, and got a job doing something else. He'd been intending to pull the pin for a while, but he held on long enough to force them to follow through. It was not a good time, PR-wise, for that company. The next story is titled, Compliance with Crap Ex-Roommate's Agreement to Pay Our Gas Bill Ended Up Saving Me $400. Starting in March, gas company in my area stopped processing startup or shut down requests to protect their workers from entering homes, properties. My crap roommate was moving out April 1st and I asked her to transfer the account since we wouldn't be able to do the shutdown, startup process. She said no. She said that she would just continue to Venmo request us until I could open my own account and then she would cancel hers. Okay? Fine. I waited for Venmo requests. And waited. And waited. Since that is what we agreed on. I just got a letter in the mail saying there was no account on file for this residence but there was gas being used. I immediately called to sort things out, slightly worried. Apparently she cancelled her account and told them to shut off the gas. On April 1st. The day she moved out. Well, as I mentioned to her, they're not processing those requests. So as far as they're concerned, gas just went into an empty home. As far as they're concerned, I just moved in and put in a start-up request, essentially negating the unprocessed shut-off request, so I will start getting charged for gas now. But there's no record of me ever living here before, so all the gas from April to mid-June is just unaccounted for and not my responsibility. They have no way of charging it to me. So, thanks crap roommate for the free gas. The next story is titled, You Want a Free Pen? Okay, so I work at a certain red store with a white dog, and it's located very close to the public trolley line, one that comes all the way from downtown. As a result, we get some homeless people wandering about sometimes. They sometimes scare other customers, but unless they do anything to provoke anyone, we can't just kick them out. So an older, questionable-looking lady with a large straw hat comes up to my register and asks to borrow a pen. However, she doesn't realize she is holding her own and I spot it. I say okay and hand her my pen from my register. She then proceeds to walk away to go shopping, or whatever they do in the store, never returning it, as expected. My current customer, whom I was ringing up, asked, "Don't you want your pen back?" I knew she wasn't going to give it back. I gave her one without ink. The next story is titled, Tell Me Not to Come In? I'm more than okay with that. Once many moons ago, actually it was just over a year, I was working for a big box store in their back room as a packaging, shipping clerk. The company I worked for is notorious for how they treat their employees, and at the time it was right after they changed their sick pay. I accrued it pretty fast and had 34 hours in their sick pay with 49 hours for vacation, and I also worked overnight and never took sick days. Overall, it was a pretty sweet schedule for me because I love being up all night and I had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off. In fact, I'm one of the very few people who worked my department overnight on weekends. Even though people were trained, they were always stolen, and one of the very few who can work a register, which I would do when the store opened, as I would cover the electronics desk until I left for the morning. I was one out of two people who could work electronics, but the other was a manager and had managerial stuff to do. Alas, we come to my malicious compliance. I hurt my leg. Plain and simple. I was able to deal with it in my department because we had wheeled stools, so I kept my leg on it and had someone do my heavy lifting. They were sympathetic, and it was Saturday, so the plan was I would rest up and hopefully it would be better by Sunday evening. At least it was fine until I got called to electronics. I asked for a stool, but I was told they couldn't accommodate me because I got hurt off property shift. Okay, that's fine. The assistant manager then started saying how it's unprofessional for me to sit on the job and I just can't be doing that. They even pulled the, if we did it for you then we would have to do it for everyone. Finally she told me, if you're injured use your medical leave and call out. Wow. Okay. I know she's new, but if she's gonna say that then I will. So I told her never mind about the stool. By then it was 30 minutes until I had to go anyways, and that I'll manage. As soon as I got home I called out. I rested on my couch all day playing Persona, and then I rested for the next 3 days, and then for the hell of it I called out on Thursday because my leg still had a little bit of pain, which was more than easily manageable, but I like spiting people. My department got super backed up. She had to cover electronics for me. My department manager was upset over the backlog, and I got to spite my TTYASM just for the fun of it. The next story is titled, You Want Me to Come to Your Social Gathering? Fine, I'll come. A few years ago I was stuck living with my dad, and would often get dragged out because you don't have a choice, you need to be with the family, which would just consist of them talking crap about me while I ate a schnitzel. Anyway, this one specific time my dad walked into my room and said, "Next Saturday we're going to a social gathering with my friends, and you're coming." I said, "Yeah, sure thing, I'm sure he'll be doing that." Copped a dirty look, then he left. I didn't hear about it at any time afterwards, so I assumed he'd finally taken a hint that I wasn't going. Keep in mind I'm 16 at this stage, and have been well able to take care of myself for years. The night before he busts into my room, demanding to see what I'm going to wear to the social tomorrow, I let him know that I have no intention of going and have made this very clear, but once again I get told, I will take all technology you have and ground you if you don't, but you don't have an option, you're coming, which of course I kind of expected at this point. After demanding to see what I'm wearing and me saying the phrase, I don't know, enough to summon Beetlejuice 5 times over, he finally leaves, not before saying, dress nicely, this is formal, which in his terms means, I'll be wearing a golf shirt and shorts, but you need to dress nicely to make me look good. So I spend the night going through my wardrobe, putting a lovely outfit together. When it's time to leave I walk out in a mini skirt and crop top, plus a leather jacket of course just to top it all off. I mean I thought I looked great but apparently he didn't agree. Are you really gonna wear that? To which I replied, yes, I am, I told you to dress nice. Yep, this is nice, I said. I wasn't made to go places after that, worth dealing with a few slut-shame comments throughout the night to never have to do that crap again. The next story is titled, Finance claims they want travel reimbursements simplified, but they really don't. In the beginning, the corporate god of travel reimbursement said, ye shall save and provide original receipts. So let it be written, so let it be done. The work was tedious, but the paperwork gods were satisfied. Then, a decision comes down that, in order to improve morale and establish trust, we're going to allow you to just list a few things. Total amount within corporate-approved tipping guidelines and alcohol expenditure maximums considered. The name of the establishment. Most of us saved the receipts anyway as well as a list of attendees, but as long as it was paid on the corporate card, that didn't matter, supposedly. And this all went well, until one day when it didn't. You see, my coworkers were out in Las Vegas doing some client training, and the expectation was that each week one of the 2 trainers would take their trainees out to lunch on Friday. There are and were tons of great places to eat in Las Vegas, so it was always a tough choice where they would go. But they decided on this legendary Chinese restaurant that's sadly no longer with us. But they had an amazing lunch buffet that was $20 each with tax already included. Counting the 2 instructors and the 23 students, that came out to $500. So no big deal, right? Just write down name of the place and the total expense, then file for the reimbursement, easy peasy. Only, for some reason, instead of the no questions asked, we're all about trust here, policy, crap hit the fan. And that's how my friend wound up on a tense phone call with finance explaining why he was being reimbursed exactly $500 for a place called the House of Joy. Edit to add, I realized I needed to make one point much more clear. The other trainer set this all up intentionally, knowing exactly how it would look in the reimbursement system, but he made sure he did it on the week when his partner was due to pay. The next story is titled, Don't Move Until You Tell Me to. Okay, I'll stay here for 2 hours. I was in 5th grade, and the physical education instructor at my elementary school, like most, was mean, strict, and generally took his job way too seriously. I'd never had any real issues with him myself, but there were various occasions where I witnessed him harassing other kids in my class. On this particular day he decided that I was being too rowdy for a 5th grader in PE, so he ordered me to sit down in the designated timeout chair with some other kids he'd deemed naughty. After around 15 minutes, the other kids I'd been sitting with were told to get up and continue doing PE things. When I moved to follow them, the instructor told me to stay in the timeout seat until he told me to move. Having already been annoyed at missing what was essentially a second recess, I decided that the next logical step was to stay in that chair until the end of class. When he gathered up my classmates, he never told me to get up and join them. So I continued sitting in the hot South Florida sun as I watched him lead my class away. I stayed there for the next half hour still thinking he'd at least send someone to get me once he realized I hadn't followed the class, but no one came. There was a water fountain at my side, and other than the mild discomfort presented by the heat and humidity, I was having a decently nice time sitting around outside while my class was off watching some assembly. I was out there for the entire duration of the assembly and, after finding that my class hadn't yet returned to the classroom, I walked into the cafeteria as lunch was coming to an end. My teacher, who had been with my class watching the assembly and stayed with them for lunch, rushed over to me as I walked through the back door of the cafeteria covered in sweat, asking me where I had been this whole time. I explained that I had been sat down during PE and told not to move until instructed to do so before the PE teacher had taken the class and left me behind. She felt sorry for me and let me eat my lunch in class. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.